Welcome everyone to the Global Mindfulness in Education Summit. We are exploring mindfulness around the world in this summit together with my co-host Chris Willard, and today I'm going to be interviewing Karen Young, who is our representative for Australia, and she is a psychologist and the founder and director of Hey Sigmund, which is a research-based company that helps people of all ages, but especially children with anxiety. And she is the author of 2 children's books, Hey Warrior and Hey Awesome, which we will have some images and show you how you can get hold of those books. And today we're going to talk about how mindfulness can calm anxiety at school. So welcome, Karen, and thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, thank you for having me. This is such an important topic, so I feel really privileged to be a part of it.
Great. So let's just start off. So can you just tell us, when do you think you first experienced mindfulness, even though maybe you didn't know it was called mindfulness at the time?
Yeah, I think as kids, we are all very mindful, and kids can at a time. So I think we're born quite mindful, but the world's life experiences, that starts to fade. So my first conscious memory of mindfulness was actually only a few years ago, and it was because I learned and realised how important it was to actually strengthen the brain. So for me, it's like, well, I do physical exercise for my body, but what about my brain? And I know physical exercise does that too, but mindfulness is amazing for the brain. So it was really, probably a few years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, when I realised just how big this was and what a difference it can make.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have a similar journey when you're like, wow, this is actually so beneficial for yourself personally. So tell us a little bit about what's happening in Australia. What kind of, are there any traditions in Australia around mindfulness?
What's happening that I'm aware of is, I know it's becoming bigger in schools, so we're starting to introduce it into schools, and I think that's really great. And there's research going on in schools, which is happening around it. But in terms of what do we do, how are we mindful, I think we spend a lot of time outdoors. We spend a lot of time at the beach. We spend a lot of time in the bush. We spend a lot of time around a campfire. That's what we do. We love the outdoors. And I don't think we realise that a lot of these activities, we're actually being mindful when we do it. So mindfulness, I think one of the great things about mindfulness is we can often be mindful without even realising it. And it's when we taking a break from our lives and slowing down. And I think our love of the great outdoors is probably one way this happens.
Yeah, I lived in Australia for 2 years, so I know exactly what you mean. It's a very, you're always out in nature, and it does just kind of rejuvenate you and make you really present, doesn't it? So I love those examples. I'm so glad to hear it's, they're doing research and it's becoming more and more prevalent in the school system. That's great. So can you tell us, are there kind of big organizations in Australia, or is there a way for people to connect together? I mean, I think people would connect through you. You would be one of the representatives, and I know you get a lot of traffic to your website and a lot of people coming because anxiety, I think, is on the rise, isn't it? And so, but have you seen like any conferences or any things happening in Australia that might be of interest to people watching?
I know there are things happening, but off the top of my head, I don't. But I know there are things happening. I know that I get notifications all the time of mindfulness groups and mindfulness courses. I've done one myself. So I think as we open up to it, become more commonplace and it will happen more and more. So we certainly have organisations that promote it, and a big one here is Smiling Mind. They have the app, and I know they're the ones that that's where a lot of work is done in schools. A lot of the schools use Smiling Mind. There's a lot of different ways to practice mindfulness, but that's a big one here that I think a lot of people would be aware of here.
Right, great. So tell us a little bit more about kind of what you're doing, like how you work with anxiety, especially with children. So are you seeing an increase in anxiety in young people? And tell us a little bit about what you see in schools in terms of anxiety.
It's definitely on the rise, and I know teachers and parents are worried about the rise. People say time's different, are we just more aware of it? I think it's all of those things. I know anxiety was certainly around when we were kids and when our parents were kids. It's not a new thing. It's a very human thing. We've been experiencing anxiety since the beginning of us. I think there are things that are causing it to rise. There are increased pressures. There's less play. There's more structure, and that can escalate anxiety. And we're more focused on probably tuned into it more and more responsive as well. But there's certainly a rise. And I know schools, something I've seen in this country, as schools are really becoming more proactive in relation to supporting kids and strengthening them against anxiety. So I think the stigma is really loosening around anxiety, and the conversation's happening more. And schools and teachers are more open to how do we help these kids once anxiety's got a firm grip of them, but also how can we strengthen all kids, because anxiety is not an anxious kid's problem, it's an everybody issue. It's just a bigger problem for some kids. What can we do that can support them? And I know mindfulness is a big one that the schools are taking on.
Yeah, and Karen, tell us a little bit about if you're a teacher watching this, what does it look like in a classroom when you see anxiety, or a parent, maybe what things would you notice in your own child?
Parents might notice or what ifs or need for lots of reassurance. But what if this happens? What if you're late to pick me up? But what if something happens to you? They might note anxiety can show itself as anger, which is the fight part of the fight or flight. It might be having trouble sleeping. Nausea, a sick tummy is a big one. All what bodies are meant to do, but it can make them feel sick. It can cause tummy pain. It can cause the muscles in the tummy to contract. Anxiety can do that. Headaches, wobbly muscles. So that's what parents might notice. Clinginess, did I say clinginess? Yeah. That's what parents might notice. In school, teachers might notice sometimes kids can fly under the radar because they'll sit back, so they're absolutely no problem at all, but anxiety can be missed. It might look not paying attention, because anxious thoughts are really intrusive and it will pull kids away. So while kids are thinking, don't pick me, don't pick me, don't pick me, what if I don't my work done, what if I fail the exam, they're not able to focus on what's happening in front of them, which again is where mindfulness can help. What are we doing right now? Right now you're safe. It can look like inattentiveness. It can look like twitchiness and wriggliness. It can look like anger and aggression and tantrums and bad behaviour. It's not bad behaviour, it's anxiety, but it can look like that. It can, again, look like sick tummies and headaches and not asking questions, not contributing in class. And again, that's because anxiety's got them on guard and saying, you might look silly, you might say something wrong, you better not say anything. If you're asking questions, the teacher's going to know you don't know the answer. So it can look like that as well. So it can come out in lots of different ways, and it can just look like the child who's just sitting back quietly. The thing about anxiety is it's also got lots of strengths. So I always say, if you want to know what's happening in class or the playhouse, just and they can be really tuned in and are great planners. So they'll have things worked out, and that's part of the brain's way of staying safe. They can be really sensitive and the kind kids. So it's not. It has all different ways of showing itself, but it can really cause trouble, especially in the classroom.
Yeah. And what are there specific mindfulness practices that you've found very helpful for anxiety with different ages of children?
Anything that focuses on breath, I think, is really powerful for anxiety. Breath, when you're focusing on breath, you are in the now. You can't not be in the now when you're focusing on breath. Thoughts can take you into the future or the past, and you can feel all sorts of those thoughts will lead your feelings. But when you're focusing on breath, you're here. And the brain is safest in the moment. So if we can have our kids learn how to focus on the moment, the brain will feel safer, because right now, right here, you are safe. And that's when anxiety will ease. But as well as that, strong deep breathing initiates a relaxation response, which actually starts to neutralise the neurochemical surge, which causes the physiology of anxiety and all the horrible physical symptoms. So breath counting, in count 1, out count 1, in count 2, out count 2. That's just a really, just a lovely, easy one. It's a form of mindfulness, but as well as that, they're able to reverse that physiology of anxiety and bring calm. With little kids, the one I really like is pretend you've got a cup of hot cocoa in your hands and breathe in for 3, smell it for 3, hold it for 1, blow it cool for 3. There's one I really like for teens. I love them because the thing about anxiety in the classroom is it shuts down the prefrontal cortex, so it makes it really difficult to when they're called on in class or during an exam. If they're anxious, the information won't be there when they need it. And that's one, actually, when I'm talking to kids in a classroom about anxiety, that's the one where they go, that happens to me. And it's that kind of experience of, okay, now I get it, now I'm listening. Because I think a lot of kids have had that experience, and it might be on the sports field, it might be on the stage doing a performance, forgetting the words or forgetting the notes when they're in a recital, in an exam. So one I like for that is if you imagine a sideways figure 8. And the reason I like it is because I encourage them to do it with touch, because touch is grounding. So anxiety is flighty, touch is grounding. But as well as that, it's another thing back. Breathe in. So for the first belly of the 8, you breathe in for 3, hold it for 1, and then breathe out for 3. But do it on your wrist or your arm or your leg. You can do it under your desk during an exam. Focus, and it just pulls them back to that sense of touch right now. Just focus on that and breathe. And I think that's a really lovely one. And the thing is that no one will even know what you're doing. No one will even know you're doing mindfulness or finding calm, and you bring your thinking brain back on. It'll calm anxiety and you'll be good to go. So there's a few there, and there are different ones for different ages. And for the everyday ones, and especially for ones still starting, I think an app is a really great way to go, because it's just it's something to fix on with a busy brain. And it's just, I just think it's an easy way to get started for them. And I do it. So even if you've been doing it for a while, it's good.
Yeah, I'm going to start doing that. That's a great one. The figure 8, and I think, like, I keep hearing, we did a teen summit earlier in the year, and we keep hearing about so many children or teens experiencing this exam anxiety. So anything that we can share to help them is great, because it's not accurately really measuring what they can do when they just kind of go blank, isn't it? And feel so bad for people that have that situation. So that's something, I mean, teachers could share that with students in the classroom, just as general tips. So tell us a little bit about the work. Like, Karen, do you go into schools, or are you dealing more with people one-on-one that come to you through the school system, or how does it work?
So I'm consulting with schools, going into schools and talking to classes of kids or grades of kids. And as well as that, I do seminars, so teachers or therapists, for psychologists, anyone who works with kids and teens as well.
Okay, great. And tell us about the inspiration, because I'm not sure, but I think last time I spoke to you, you just had the first book, and now is that a new book, the Hey Awesome?
Yeah. So that one came about with anxiety. There's often a lot of focus. The focus is really heavily tilted towards the negative. So it's what I can't do. It's what I'm scared of. It's what's bigger than me. It's how I'm not like other kids or other teens. The truth is that an anxious brain is a really strong, powerful, really amazing brain. And anyone who has tried to push up against a child in the midst of anxiety would know how strong that brain is. For love or money, it's tough. And if an anxious brain doesn't want to do something, it's not going to happen today or right now. Right now, it's not going to happen. It'll happen when they find it. The reason I wrote Hey Awesome is because I thought, I wish kids knew how amazing they were. And I get a lot of emails and a lot of talk from kids and teens saying, I thought there was something wrong with me. I thought I was the only one. And as you can imagine, when kids and teens are feeling like that, that's only going to make anxiety worse. And what I used to say was, if only you knew, everybody gets anxious on some level. And the thing is, your brain's really amazing. You just need to know how. And it's about turning anxiety down and turning the good stuff. So the good stuff can shout more and have more airtime. So that's where Hey Awesome came from. So Hey Awesome is a book about the strengths that same brain that can make you feel anxious sometimes also is really amazing. Doesn't mean when you get rid of anxiety you're going to lose the amazing. The amazing is just going to be bigger and have more room to breathe. And as well as that, it's just got little tips for easing anxiety and how people can change their brain and how that all works.
I can't wait to read it. Sounds great, and I agree. Like, children are just awesome, aren't they? And so creative, and they have so much potential and so much to share with everyone. So I love that you've written a book to help them see that as well. So just before we end, Karen, is there any last thing that you'd like to share with our audience, just about mindfulness in general or mindfulness in Australia?
I think what I'd like people to know is just how much it can change the structure and function of the brain for all of us. And if we can get kids started into a practice, and we kind of know that there's something going on, there's been a form of meditation or mindfulness all through history, through it's doing something, but we know that it actually changes the structure of the brain and can really strengthen kids. And I've actually said, I think one day it'll be like seatbelts and bike helmets, and people will say, really, you didn't do not wearing seatbelts and not doing other things that now, or not wearing sunscreen, and we go, really, you did that once? That's ridiculous. That's so silly. So I think mindfulness one day will be so much a part of our lives and the importance of it. It'll be like exercise. We'll know it's important. We'll acknowledge it's important. We won't always get to it, and that's okay. We won't always do it, but its importance will be so firmly grounded in us, and that recognition of its importance will be so strong. So if the younger we can get kids started, I think the better. It'll just become a habit, and it will stay with them.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Karen, for sharing all your knowledge and ideas with us, and those very practical practices that people can, just do very simply and start right away. So thank you again for joining the summit.
Been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.